All right, welcome to another episode of The More You Know. Today I'm joined with Lee Hopkins. And just a fair warning, this week, I think this will be the final podcast where I'm recording with a guest for 2020. I will be traveling for Christmas, so I won't be able to record anything with a guest, but I do, and I might do a little 2020 recap of looking back at 2020 and releasing that next week as a solo podcast. But we shall see with the time. But I'm looking forward to that and the new year. Yeah, Lee, can you give us a introduction of yourself, man?
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Brian, for having me. Yeah, like you said, my name is Lee Hopkins, and I am a transformational coach, I'm a podcaster myself, and a motivational speaker. And I am the owner of the Patterns of Possibility. That is my company in which I help people transform their lives by inspiring them to strive for confidence, direction, and resilience.
Yeah, tell us what kind of inspired this, really.
Yeah, well, my inspire I it was inspired by my own journey. I have had so much trouble making genuine connections with people, and I've spent most of my life just trying to figure out why. And I thought it was because of the people that were around me. So I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and I quite frankly moved around a bit in Ohio too. So looking for my tribe. And then eventually had a job opportunity in California, and I thought, well, there is no reason for me to stay in Ohio at all. I'm not making any real good connections. Family life is not great either. So I left thinking that I need to move to a bigger city with more people. So I did that, had the same experience in California, and I thought, well, California, I should have moved to a bigger city. I didn't live in Oakland or San Francisco or anything like that. I lived in a smaller city, but still bigger than Ohio. So I thought, well, I'm going to move again. So I moved to Chicago and had the same problem, very same problem. Still couldn't make connections. And I realized that there was a pattern of behavior that I was doing. And it's only when I realized that it wasn't the place, no matter where I went, it was happening. So I'm the common denominator. So I figured out how to become my genuine self and less lonely because I did that. And I want to help other people feel that same joy that I have.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you. Well, before we start with that, how was the culture really in California? Because moving from like Midwest Ohio area all the way to the West Coast, I feel like there's a huge cultural difference within people there.
Oh, yeah.
Tell
Yeah.
me more about that.
Well, as you say that, that's pretty funny to me because I hadn't thought about that for a very long time. But yes, um, when I moved to California, I was so surprised by the food. The food we had was absolutely amazing. I remember when I tasted a burrito for the very first time, it was delicious because get this, I thought that Taco Bell and Chipotle was real Mexican food. Really. I thought it was until I went to California and there was just so much more to it. So the culture around that was just the food. I love to experience the food. It was amazing.
Interesting. What was it like food trucks or was it more of like restaurant style?
There were a bunch of those food trucks, and that was my first time encountering food trucks too. Um, it was an interesting concept. I love the idea. So food trucks and restaurants, and it was like a hit or miss sometimes, depending on where I go. Like there could be really fancy restaurants with okay food, hole in the wall places with delicious, authentic, wonderful food.
The stereotype against California is that like everyone there thinks that they're like a hot shot or they're like a Instagram influencer. Did that stand true for when you went there?
I moved to Central California, so if you're probably unfamiliar with that because it just is not not a place that people go for a destination. But there's north, south, and the central California. So Northern California is like pretty like liberal elite. They got that kind of idea of liberal elite, and I think Southern California has this idea where they're just like plastic people. No offense. I hope anybody doesn't take any offense to that, but it's kind of like that's the stereotype around it. So Central California is the opposite of all of it. Nothing like that. It's farmland. So most of our food in the US comes from that Central Valley area. So basically, I didn't see any of that. The the culture where people are taking pictures and being influencing and stuff like that. I didn't see any of that. I saw more of the car culture. There are a lot of people who just love to race cars because it doesn't really rain. So there's a lot of people who are really into that. Will go in tracks and they'll race and yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. What what was the breaking point for you for when you were like, all right, I need to get out of California? And did you just like pack your bags up and go, or did you have like another job opportunity lined up in Chicago?
Oh yeah, so I actually did have another job opportunity lined up. So what happened for me is that throughout my entire journey, when I discovered that I was able to drink alcohol and buy alcohol, I started doing that. And so that's all I did basically was drink and drink. So when I turned 21, I was drinking, and then I moved to um, California when I was 26. So we're talking about Ohio first, and then California. Moved to California when I was 26. So during my time in California, I just kept drinking. I was drinking. I was miserable, and I was just a wreck. So it came to a point where I had a relationship that ended, and it was just a really terrible breakup. And I never felt so alone. I was just really depressed. And I had people in my life, but of course, there weren't any genuine connections. I couldn't even tell people how I felt about it because I just knew I felt sad, you know? And so after drinking a whole bunch, um, it occurred to me that I got to do something. Like, my job sucks. Well, I mean, it's okay. My job was okay, but I wasn't challenged. And I like to be challenged. And that's basically the only thing that I knew about myself is that I want to be challenged. So I took this opportunity to say, well, I need to do something. What is it I'm going to do? I don't know. And then this opportunity came up at work where I was able to use a computer to use Excel, basically. So my job at the time was working in a warehouse. I was unloading trucks and things like that. So an opportunity promotion within the company came up, and I was working on a computer in the warehouse, and they really needed some Excel use, and it turned out to be a lot more interesting than I thought it was. It was a new skill to learn. It was challenging. So I found myself taking some work home. I was just so excited about it, challenging myself, trying to find answers to problems that no one asked. And that was a turning point for me right there. That was the realization that, well, what would I like to do more? This is what happened in the realization. What would I like to do more? When I come home from work, do I want to drink or do I want to work on this really cool problem? And it turned out at first I tried to do both. I'm drinking and trying to do the problem, but then I
Oh
can't
no.
focus. Yeah, right? I, I can't focus. And so I decided, well, let's see what I do if I stop drinking. All right, I'm working on a problem. It's great. I'm feeling good. And I just got that buzz off of working on this problem. And so with that skill, with all that information that I picked up, I decided that, wow, I'm sober. I'm thinking better. Um, I'm going to try and apply for a job. And I did that. And I actually got the promotion. So it was work. It was a year. It wasn't uh, like a month or two and it turned my life around. But it was a year of work and it was a focus on making sure that I was able to do the analytics for the rest of my life. That analytics, that Excel stuff. I wanted to do that for the rest of my life. I just knew I wanted to. So I that's how I got the job in Chicago.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. I definitely feel what you're choosing. In college, I worked in the warehouse up at school. I was a supply chain major. It was a good experience seeing what happens in the warehouse. But I was also in your shoes too. I was picking orders, unloading, unloading trucks. It's always a fun time. For me as well, I love problem solving with anything. Excel is always an interesting thing, and it's good that you're trying to develop those skills because once you solve a really complex problem, it's really rewarding. Um,
Yes.
so 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 it sounds like you got something going, and like you're doing some meaningful work that you do enjoy. Um, when you moved to Chicago, were you instantly able to connect with people, or what was the turning point of where you recognized like patterns that you were doing that were inhibiting you from connecting with people?
Oh yeah. Well, man, no way I was able to connect with anyone. What happened from the transition from Ohio to California, I keep going back to that because I want to really illustrate that pattern. That Ohio to California, I moved there and I was just afraid. So I actually moved with a partner to California, and that fell apart pretty quickly. So I moved there and I was like, okay, I moved here because I was afraid. I had someone with me because I was afraid. I'm gonna do the mission in Chicago solo. And look at me, I'm freaking awesome because I got this all by myself. I worked really hard. I put my mind to it. Can't nobody tell me nothing. I know how to make my life work. So I came into Chicago thinking that I had changed everything that I needed to change. So I had stopped drinking as much. I had focused on working these problems. And I come to Chicago and boom, nothing was different because um, the way I knew to connect to people was to go to bars, was to go hang out at bars. And sure enough, that's what I did. I moved into a place that that was like a really small shoebox, smallest place I've ever lived in my entire life, a studio apartment. And because it was so small, I really didn't want to be there. So I was leaving all the time. And right around the corner from me, there was a Starbucks, there was a pizza place that sold pizza by the slice, and there was a bar with really cheap beer. And I spent a lot of time at the pizza place and the bar with really cheap beer. So it was hard for me to make connections because I was still doing the things I did before. I didn't realize it. I was just doing it in a different place. So I would say that I did make connections with people at the bar, like in so much that they would know what I wanted when I came in. They'd know my order and stuff like that. Yeah. And so, yeah, those are the connections that I made. But when I sobered up, nothing. Like nobody to talk to. Still lonely.
Yeah, it's very powerful of like what alcohol can do to you when in social settings. It's crazy how it kind of just brings that barrier down of an introvert and make them an extrovert. I can totally attest to that too, because for me, sometimes it's hard to get the nerves to go talk to someone new. But if you have like a beer or two in you, it's just easier
Yeah,
to
definitely.
talk to someone. But
Yeah.
did you find ways of like connecting with people without the use of like a beer or two?
Yeah, that came a bit later after I started to really work on myself. So while drinking, I met a person that became my partner. And um, that relationship was what kind of changed everything because it was a relationship that looked just like my other relationships. Like I was dating the very same person, like essentially doing the same things. So I was doing the same things, attracting the same kind of person. And this person was like, "Hey, you need to go to therapy." And I was like, "Well, I guess so. I'll go." Because I didn't really know about myself. And I thought, well, other people know. Other people know because I guess I didn't figure it out. So, and also it was a people pleaser. I really wanted to make this person happy. So I went. And when I went to therapy, that's where I learned a lot of what I do now. It was a cognitive behavioral type therapy. And it was based in that. So I was able to actually feel less fearful because I was able to recognize people's patterns. Like I would be more I would pay more attention to what people were doing and how I felt about it. And then I could respond in that way. So if my partner was blaming me for something and I'm looking around thinking, I don't understand where this is coming from. And if I try to get clarification, like, wow, this is weird. I feel like I'm in trouble. I feel angry or I feel upset. And then I start saying, well, I don't understand what I did. Can you tell me what I did so that I don't do it again to make you upset? And they couldn't tell me what it was that I did. And so I'm like, well, why are you, doesn't make any sense to me. And so, like, having those kind of interactions and those moments gave me more confidence in myself and what I was seeing and how I felt about myself. Because I'm not always doing something that is hurtful or mean. I'm not uh, useless or anything like that. And so having the confidence to see it, like, I'm not doing anything to cause this. And then I was able to build up confidence to talk to other people and realize that, well, if I get rejected, I can immediately know that it is not about me, or I would say, thank goodness, because, well, we're not compatible and I don't need to spend time trying to make us compatible if we're not. So those are a couple of things that really, really helped me be able to talk to other people and connect. And it was really helpful to find my own tribe. Like, of just going through and sifting through, okay, you're not a match for me, you're not a match for me, and them rejecting me, me rejecting them. So that was really helpful for that.
Gotcha. Um, I know that when you first talk to people, I know that when people get rejected, the first thing that comes to mind, well, I shouldn't say a lot of people. I'm going to talk about how I feel when I get rejected, and maybe some other people can't relate. Let's say, for example, for jobs, if you're rejected, your immediate thought is to go to blame yourself. Why wasn't I good enough? Why wasn't I? I. How can people, or how could people get away from blaming themselves but looking at the bigger picture?
Yeah, I think it comes with those three things that I talked about: confidence, direction, and resilience. So you have the confidence in yourself to believe that you are good enough, that you can do a skill well. And that comes from the confidence comes from really reinforcing it for yourself, really seeing and believing that the effect that you have on the world is real. Like, you have confidence that you can do something really well, you see it, no one can tell you anything differently. So that rejection that you get is like, well, I guess they weren't, they missed out. They missed out on something. They weren't smart enough to pick me up. So, or whatever. But just know that it's not about you per se. They have their own view of the world. And that direction there, well, that's not going to stop you because you got rejected once. So then that's motivation to get back up. You've been rejected, but you got your eyes on the prize. You're going to go where you're going. And so that resilience too, that's where it kicks in and it says, hey, um, I know this is tough, and you are going to feel sad, and you are going to feel it because you have to take a moment to feel the rejection and the pain or the happiness. You got to feel everything, and the resilience will give you that insight to really problem solve. So you like, I'm sad now. I realize it. I'm gonna deal with it now. I'll be sad. It's okay, and then I'll get back up because I know this is one thing. This is one rejection. So I would say, to answer your question, for an actionable step, which is something that I recommend that everyone do, is to um, make sure that you know what you're good at. Explore that and say that you're good at it. Say, I'm good at XYZ, whatever it is. Just say you're good at it. It could be absolutely anything. And you want to make sure that it is framed in a positive light. So let's say you mismanage your money or you spend money wildly. Well, you're good at mismanaging your money. You're good at spending your money on weird things, whatever. But the reason you do that is to say it out loud, to make sure it goes back into your ears and stays into your consciousness so that you know this is what you're doing. This is the effect. Because you're only listening to yourself anyway. Like, you make up your own decisions, you make your own mind up. And I mean, Brian, have you ever heard anybody say, well, that sounds weird now that you say it out loud?
Yeah, yeah. Even for me, I do that all the time, and like it's just like in your head, you can understand something in your head, but when you say it out loud, it just makes a whole lot more sense when you say it out loud. But yeah, I definitely get it.
Yeah, you get clarity, or it's, yeah, you just it just makes it clearer for you. It makes it more real. So I think it reinforces this belief that you have in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot because while you were talking about that, it kind of brings me back to when I first started working out. When I first started working out, I learned a lot from my peers around me, and then as time went on, like I grew more confidence in myself. And when people came to me asking about health and fitness stuff, that kind of reinforced my thoughts of like, okay, I actually do understand what I'm doing. I do know what I'm doing. If people are gonna come up to me and ask me for tips on losing weight, eating healthy, working out, and that like them telling me that or coming to me for that kind of made me more confident in my abilities and gave me the confidence to start a blog, start actually posting on social media of like workout tips. So I like that you brought this topic up.
Yeah, that absolutely. You have people validating you because sometimes we're too close to the trees to see the forest, right? So people saw what you were doing and they were like, "Yeah, I really like this. He thinks he knows what he's doing. I've got to go talk to him." And were you shocked when that happened?
Honestly, I was a little shocked because for me, like, okay, because like I see my body in the mirror almost every single day, so I don't see any of the big results that people that haven't seen me for a month or two are going to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was shocked too when people were like, "You've changed," or, "There's something different about you." Like, okay, or you're doing this very well. I'm like, "Am I?" I get, and I had to check on it. I guess I am.
And I want to touch on a phrase that a lot of people talk about, but it's not as easy as it sounds. The phrase of um, just don't care about what people think about you. Because I know that I believed in that, but I got that reinforced because I watched vloggers on YouTube. This goofy guy named Max Tuning, he always said, like, dude, I don't care what people are going to think about me because I'm doing my own thing. I believe what I'm doing is really good. So I'm just going to do me and live my life how I want and just forget about people. That phrase is really hard to take in because it's not as easy as it sounds. What are your thoughts on that phrase?
Yeah, I don't like that phrase. I don't like it at all because um, it makes you isolated. I think feedback from people is very important. So I know that there are people out there taking criticism and so forth, but there's feedback. It's important to get feedback. So maybe there's something out there that he wouldn't like to hear or that you wouldn't like to hear, but it's absolutely true. And if you go and say that you don't care about it, then it might hurt your relationship with these people in the long run. So I imagine that person, that blogger, he's like thinking about people who are not connected to him at all, who are really far away from him, and they're just judging him for something. I understand that, but I think that it is very important to consider the people that are close to you and take in their feedback and really make sense of it. Like I I think that sorry, but I think that when people are like not listening to the kind of feedback they're getting, then they're missing out on an opportunity. And the key is not to just pretend like you didn't hear it, but it is to process it and decide whether you want to keep it or not. And once you get better at doing that stuff rolls off your shoulder. That's only when you get stuff that roll off your shoulder. So this is where your confidence comes in. You're like, well, are what they saying, is that true? If it's not, then you can discard it pretty easily as long as you know that's true. So you can take it in, be like, oh, this is a comment about such and such. Okay. Um, that's not true. Okay, bye.
I get that.
After, yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I think in the eyes of the YouTuber that I was talking about, I think it's easy for him to not care about people what other people say, as in the random thousands, hundred thousand of thousands viewers that he has. So out of like let's say for example, 100,000 people are subscribed to him, and 20,000 don't like what he does, but the 80,000 like him. Now that you kind of say it in that way, I think like the way that he was saying it was that like if you are an influencer and you have like a small amount of your people like backlashing you, that can easily um overtake the positives of it. So I think he meant like not caring what like the small majority of trolls or haters think about you.
Yeah, and to your point, I think that they provide some value too. If you just look at them with a different frame of mind, because it's a fundamental fact that humans fear what they don't understand. They fear that they fear things that they can't control. And so I think when people are out there um, trolling, they're looking for some self-esteem to pull from you. They're like, oh well, they're trying to get what you've got, which is your confidence, by tearing you down. And just realizing that you are somebody that frightens them can be pretty empowering. If you would look at it that way, like, man, you scare the heck out of these people because what you're doing is so unique. It is so powerful. It's so touching that they're just shook. Thinking about it that way, well, I got haters, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely attest to that. When I was like posting a lot on Instagram, and there's this one day I had a random direct message of, and I posted like a after gym picture, and then I got this one message, and it was like, "Dude, stop posting. You're small." And then that's when I was like, "Oh my god,
Oh,
I have haters out there.
hmm.
Like this is crazy."
Man, how'd you feel after that?
I mean, for me, like I kind of just laughed it off because I was like, this person really took this time out of his day to comment about me. I kind of just laughed about it, and I kind of just disregarded it. But the fact that I actually got like a mean comment back to me was like astonishing, because I was like I've hit this level where I have haters now.
Hmm. Yes, haters are your motivators, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Honestly, like that phrase to me, it's really true. Because the more that they hate on you, and the more that you keep pushing out whatever you're doing, either that be products, content, anything, the more that you're proving them wrong, really, but still holding true to yourself.
Yeah, because Brian, the key is that you have all the power. You get to decide, you get to label everyone what their value is. You get to decide if that's going to be a value to you and how it's going to be a value. If if it rolls off your shoulders and you're like trying to ignore it, I think that's putting energy into actively ignoring it. But taking it in and saying, "Wow, I got haters," just like you said, I'm motivated. That's amazing.
So I want to talk to you more about having an open mind when talking to people. Question for you though: were you really closed minded when you were in like the beginning of your journey, when you were trying to connect with people?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a steel trap. Like my mind was just completely shut for and skeptical and scared. Just being after so many years of being just like that, it was really hard to open up to people because I was afraid that they were going to hurt me in some way, physically, mentally, emotionally, some way I was going to be hurt. And if I made myself vulnerable at any point, then I'm opening up for just that. Um, so yeah, that was was the main theme. Uh,
How did you get out of being closed minded to more of an open mind?
well, it came out to realizing that my behavior was making more of the same results. I was getting more of the same results as I had before. So whatever I was doing wasn't working. And essentially becoming aware of the fact that what I was doing wasn't working. And what I really wanted was closeness and connection, because that's what I've been looking for my entire life. So what I was doing wasn't working. So if I looked at what I was doing, which was being closed minded, what's the opposite? What am I not doing? Try that. And that's what I kind of started doing. And I found that I got more of what I wanted when I started revealing more about myself to other people. And it was a scary process because in that you have to learn who to reveal yourself to and who not to. And deciphering that can be a bit tricky if you're really not paying attention to what people are doing around you. So not only are we looking at my behavior, I'm looking at my behavior and thinking, what am I doing to attribute to my feelings or the situation? What are they doing? How do they respond to some of the things that I do? And I've created some setup questions. Setup questions is the wrong word. Those are something else. Um, Setup questions, but I create questions and I throw in topics that are important to me and I gauge people's reactions so that I know how much I can talk about what.
Yeah, it's just having that mental awareness at the moment too, reading their facial expressions, reading how they're feeling when you bring up a certain topic.
Yep, absolutely.
One thing that I found really helpful throughout my life is that you're gonna meet people where they come from so many backgrounds. They believe in so many different things. I know recently, like my good friend Connor, he got really into being really spiritual stuff. So and like if it was like the old me, I would have just like said everything that he was saying was like bonkers. But keeping an open mind to to like actually hearing what people say, hearing what they say, seeing how they could like it, and just like not shutting everything down that doesn't that you don't agree on is a really big thing. Because when I could kind of listen to what other people, how they think, how they feel, what they believe in, it's a very interesting thing that I think is a good connection point because it's either one, you know it. So if you know it, you can actually talk to them and have a very educated conversation. But if you keep an open mind, a good part that I've realized that when you are learning something new from someone else, always question, always question. My friends always get mad at me because they're always like, you ask so many questions, like why? And I'm like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about, so I want to learn more. So
Hmm.
it's a hit or miss because like people are just like you're kind of annoying because you ask so many questions, but then again, like how do you expect me to talk
Yeah.
to you about this without me knowing the full thing?
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a tricky situation to deal with. I mean, everyone at the end of the day wants to be understood and seen for their authentic selves. And I think it's a really great thing that you are asking and being interested in people. It surprises me quite a bit, actually, that your friends aren't um, as forthcoming, but you may be asking a whole lot of questions. I don't know if you give them an essay to write or what, but
Sometimes I gotta admit, sometimes I go overboard and I'm just like, okay, I'm just trolling now.
just trolling. Like, hey, then, but yeah, it is all about understanding people, and a lot of people get agreement and understanding confused. They're intertwined. They're so closely linked. But the key is to make a connection. Is to understand people. You don't have to agree. Like you don't have to agree with the spirituality thing that your friend is doing, because you just are creating a connection by listening to him and or listening to them and understanding what they're feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, honestly, I'm very intrigued by what he says now, and I actually now take tidbits from what we talk about from his conversation to actually implement it into my life now, which is very
Wow.
nice.
Yeah, man, that's really impressive. Like just
It's just crazy on like how much you can learn and like how much your lifestyle can improve just by hearing people out.
absolutely. Yeah, it is a information knowledge. It's like all that is power, right? In some kind of way. And there's a theme to what I'm saying. It's all about empowerment And the more knowledge you have, the more empowerment you have. So you know a little bit about the spirituality, and you've been able to incorporate it in your life. Well, if you weren't listening or just trying to spend a bunch of energy debunking or criticizing or trying to find why you don't agree or why you should agree, then you would never get that information.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. As a closing topic, what's your biggest tip to people out there listening right now to for people that just want because like 2020 they've been stuck inside all year really, and once they get out, like some people probably lost their communication skills or just don't know how to interact with people anymore. What is as a closing statement, like what's your big tip to them of like how they can get back out there fully confident and ready to hit the road running?
All right. Well, that's a big question. It's a tall order to so
You
I
can
get to
break it down.
experience but I get
You
to
can break it
experience
down.
what what your friends get when you ask them questions like like that. But yeah, you know that I think that the best thing that you can do for yourself is to learn more about who you are. And the reason why I say this is because you be confident in how you move into the world. You'll know what is true and what's not true. So if someone's telling you that you're messed up and your life is terrible and stuff, it's only true if you believe it. If you know that you are on your way to do whatever you're destined to do, whatever you're passionate about, then what they say doesn't matter to you. Now, how do you build confidence? Well, um, getting to know yourself is that confidence. There has to be something that you are good at. There's something that you're good at. There are many things actually, and I would know right away because I'm always looking for the good things. So I would say practice telling yourself that you are good at something. Whatever it is, just tell yourself that you're good at something. And I don't mean think about it in your head. You have to say it out loud and go find what that thing is. A lot of people have no idea what it is. I didn't figure it out until I got that job that I was good at analytics, and it really stuck with me for the rest of my life. It's what I wanted to do. Keep focusing on who you are and who you want to be. That's what I would say.
You hit the nail right on the head. That was perfect. That was perfect. Where can my listeners find you at?
All right. Yeah, your listeners can find me at patternsofpossibility.com. And I also have a website. Bleh. I also have a podcast called Patterns of Possibility, and I share all of my shortcomings and my funny stories about they're funny now that I can look back at them, but the lessons I've learned, and I'm really shameless, and I'll reveal as much as I feel like is necessary, just because shame doesn't do any good for you or me. So I just want to demonstrate that as well. But patternsofpossibility.com and Patterns of Possibility on all social media platforms, Instagram, YouTube, and my podcast as well.
Sounds good, man. I'll have everything linked in the description of this podcast, guys. Go check out Lee Hopkins and his social media and the Patterns of Possibility. It was a pleasure speaking with you, man. I think you have a very amazing idea, and it's very good to see that you found your way now.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, and that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this show of The More You Know. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating this podcast on Apple Podcasts. It'll certainly help me out in the algorithm, and be sure to subscribe or follow to The More You Know on your favorite podcasting platform like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. And lastly, if you would like to contribute to The More You Know, you can head over to anchor.fm forward slash The More You Know Pod and contribute any monetary value to help the quality of the show, and in the future bring on some more interesting guests. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate all of my listeners, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week.